cup of coffee, then I'll go. Thought that I'd just drop by and let you know that I'm leaving town tomorrow. I'll cause you no more sorrow. I'll just have a cup of coffee, then I'll go. I brought the money like the lawyer said to do. It won't replace all the heartaches I've caused you. It won't take the place of loving you, I know. I'll just have a cup of coffee, then I'll go.
Welcome back to the channel, Grand Colombia, and a special Coffee Time Live. Probably not going to have much, if any, viewers, but I'm going to get it in while I can because I want to finish up on that topic about poverty. Robert, hi from Cali. Glad to see you here. You're probably going to be the only one, so it's me and you, buddy. I first addressed the question about YouTube. I've explained this endlessly, but I realize that there's new viewers or people that didn't, catch it. No, it's not targeting me specifically. And no, it's not about whatever I believe, or because, as you know, my videos are pretty much sanitized. I really don't go off on any kind of tangents. I'll make a comment here or there, but YouTube doesn't have any issue with that. It's something that's been going on for a number of years now, about 3 years, where they're trying to get rid of all the small content providers. All they really want anymore are the million and over subscriber channels, or primarily they want corporations. And with the corporations, there's a lot less maintenance with them and a lot more money. So if CNN, for example, does YouTube videos, there's tens of thousands of dollars coming to them directly from CNN for moving them up on the search list. It's just so much easier for them to cash in. I'm not going to be sending them tens of thousands of dollars for the privilege of doing videos. So they're trying to get rid of all those. We're nuisances to them. And they began with me last year in April when they demonetized my channel, which means any advertising that they do, before I got a percentage of that. Now I don't get anything. They still run the advertising, but they keep all the money. So I don't make anything from YouTube, and it's not just, you don't get like a, we're gonna inflict it on you for a month or 3 months or whatever. My email that came informing me of this said it's a lifetime ban. Didn't break any rules, didn't do anything wrong. They've just decided that that's what's going to happen. So to further make things difficult for you, they do things like shadow banning. They hide your content. If you're not subscribed and click the bell, there's a good chance you won't get notifications. But even if you do that, there's a chance you won't get notified. And now what they've started this year, and I'm not sure exactly when, but it's happened to me several times recently, is at some point during a live video, they cut your resources with them. So it's like I'm dumping buckets of information through, and they throw in a little funnel and everything kind of grinds to a halt. I've moved my settings back as much as I can. You're probably going to see maybe a degradation in quality, But, there's not much I can do about that part of it if I'm going to broadcast. But I did send off a number of requests, complaints, whatever. They usually go into a black hole. I don't know if anything will come of it. There's no person that I can contact. So, and then the final point or question, somebody just brought it up, then why don't you switch to other platforms? Well, I've been working on that for, as some of you know, for years. Going back 5 years, I've been working on alternative platforms. The problem is that YouTube provides far superior software. And if I go to another platform, there's all kinds of things that I won't be able to do that are just problematic. For example, with YouTube, I can schedule when a video is going to happen. With the other platforms have been recommended, Rumble, which is trash. Rumble is horrific. Odyssey, which is currently my go-to. Every video I've ever done is on Odyssey as a backup. But I can't pre-schedule videos there. There's a whole list of things that this software will do, but this one won't, and this one won't will do things that this one won't. And the only one that is relatively complete is YouTube. And so I'm hanging in there as long as I possibly can. I'm hoping that what I've done over the last couple days will make a difference. I found that I could select certain things actually in my YouTube administration, where I'm just kind of voluntarily scheduling things back. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. What happened Sunday was the same thing that's happened all along. Everything will be great. I'm cranking out stuff. I've got 300 fiber optic internet speed up and down, so it's not an issue on my end. I've got a high-end i7 computer with lots of RAM, and I've got a strong video card, the extra card with its own cooler. You know, over the course of these years, I've pieced these things together. It's too expensive for me to just buy, but I buy this and this and this, and that's why there's been a constant improvement in the quality on this channel. So it's not my hardware, it's not my software, and it's certainly not my internet connection. And I was able to specifically pinpoint. I went into some forums. This is happening to thousands of other people. You can usually get about a half an hour, and that's when, after that, it'll start throttling you back. So that's the situation. There is no good answer for me for this. The only alternative that's actually a viable alternative is Vimeo, except it's too expensive. I can't afford it. It's a very expensive subscription. The year, I believe, is somewhere around $1,000. I just can't do it. You guys are very generous. You help, you support the channel, but I don't get enough that would cover that. And then I still have needs of camera issues and memory cards and consumables. So that's where you guys come in handy. That's what keeps everything going, and I greatly appreciate it. It's why 7 years down the road, I'm still doing these videos. You guys are supporting it. YouTube certainly isn't. So there's that. Now, why am I on here? Well, because I figured it'd be better to do it live than to just record it. I wanted to finish up on the poverty. Tommy, nope, I'm here also. Good to see you. Only in America 007. Hi, I'm here. That's good to know. Yuka, how you doing, Yuka? It's kind of late in the afternoon for you, right? NB90, buenos dias, buenos dias. Okay. I think where I left off was I was talking about the factors in Colombia that make a difference. So quickly, I went through the situation, some of the numbers, a few charts that position Colombia as not being as bad as people think. There's just a lot of perception out there because of the different cultures. So you get off the plane and you instantly see all these brick shacks, and you look at it and you think, oh my God, these people are living in desperation. Well, they could certainly be poor, but the living in desperation percentage in Armenia, or I'm sorry, in Colombia, is no worse than it is in the United States. And I also explained, well, you say, but you got all the welfare and Section 8 and all that. That's true. But what you may not know is that's not available for everybody everywhere. And when you get out into that's in the inner cities, pretty well set. But when you get out into the countrysides, people know of Appalachia, but there's Appalachia throughout the United States, figuratively speaking. There's particularly rural, there's tons of people that don't have access to government help, or because they tend to be more salt of the earth, they're not going to go hat in hand. They're going to tough it through. If you've lived in the United States for any length of time, you've seen some of the rundown trailer parks. I threw some videos up. You could find poverty everywhere in the world, but the percentage of the absolute poverty, where you're missing meals, you can't get yourself any kind of doctor's care because you can't afford it, the things that are quantified by absolute poverty, the percentage in Colombia versus the United States is almost identical and better than most of the world. The percent, depending on when you look, pre-COVID, post-COVID, pre-COVID it was 4.2%. United States was running actually a hair over that. The United States now is 7% and Colombia is 7.4%. So COVID definitely hurt it. On the other hand, the economy is doing very well in Colombia, and jobs are getting filled up. There are jobs for people. So the perception of Colombia being so poor is not the reality. It's misunderstood. And the size of the middle class in Colombia, it is the largest group by far in Colombia. It doesn't have as many rich people as the United States by percentage, but it has a middle class that's actually larger than the United States. And the poor in general, it's similar to the U.S. It's off by about 7%, I believe, 27% in Colombia, it's around 22% in the U.S. And then you have the absolute poverty, where you're not just, the difference of regular poverty is you don't have a lot of disposable income. You're putting everything into living. But when you get to absolute poverty, you don't have enough to keep your lights on. You don't have enough to go to a doctor. You don't have enough to have meals every day. That's absolute poverty. Now, what I want to cover today, that's a quick rundown of what I talked about Sunday. I want to talk about the factors in Colombia that some are unique to Colombia, some aren't, but the factors come into play as to why the absolute poverty numbers in Colombia are actually quite good. The breed of people in the Appalachian Mountains are just the way they want to be. Poor to them is just fine. Just let them be who they are. Well, that's not exactly true. I grew up, as I've told you before, poor in very similar situation well, we call them the hills in upstate New York. The country, what a lot of people, they think of New York as New York City. And what they don't realize is that there's a good portion of New York throughout the Adirondacks down through the Finger Lakes that are as rural can be. They're as rural as anywhere. I mean, I grew up with, we had actually a pretty close neighbor, and it was about a mile away. So it's it's not that they're sitting in squalor saying, "Oh my God, this is great." But I will tell you that in that kind of poverty, in rural areas of the U.S. Now, this is not exclusive. I mean, but I'm characterizing here. I'm generalizing. You tend to have people more of faith, and you tend, as a result of that, they tend to be more optimistic. So they're not as miserable being in that poverty because they're not necessarily looking over the hill. It doesn't mean that that's what they want, but they're accepting the condition as it is, even while striving to get out of it. I have known a number of people, particularly in the hills of Pennsylvania, that are in this condition. I had a good friend when I was in the Marine Corps, and I used to go visit his family, and he wouldn't even take me for a while. He was so embarrassed. And one day we got talking about it, and so I explained to him how I grew up, and so we went to see his family. And he was thoroughly embarrassed about the situation, but I get it. It's just how it is. They were all striving to get out. Well, the mom wasn't. She just accepted, her life is played out, and she's accepting of it. But everybody that I met there, they're all striving to get out and not repeat it. And that's why you see a lot of the towns in those kind of areas, they just keep shrinking because people are trying to escape. So it's not like there's we're poor and miserable and glad of it. It's not exactly like that, but it does tend to be a lot more difficult because of their culture of, not looking for a handout or a hand, and also because of the situation. So anyway, here in Colombia, I'm going to run down some of the factors that I think have a big impact on whether somebody's just living poor or whether they're living in the absolute poverty, don't have money for a meal kind of thing. And first of all, family. And I think everybody kind of knows this. Family is like the ultimate important thing in Colombia for just about everyone. Nothing comes before family. And that means you have far less transient people in Colombia. So in other words, your family's in Armenia, and not to say you don't get some, but let's say your family's in Armenia, you grow up in Armenia, you're not as inclined as in a place like the United States, you're not as inclined to move off to another city to chase a better job or better pay. There's people that do that, but it's nowhere near the extent of a place like the United States. They tend to gravitate around family. And if they do something like that, it's of a mind to help, take care of or help support the family. So I'm going to bite the bullet and go do this, but as soon as I can, I'm going to move back to it. Family takes care of each other. And so my ex-wife, her extended family that lived all over Colombia, numbered about 300. And I know this because once a year they would get together in Quindío and have a, family reunion. There'd be about 300 of them. They would be, salsa music and, barbecues and all kinds of crazy things going on. And the year that I was living here, one of those happened. And, I met her family. Now, they were spread out, but in basically three parts of the country. So you had the bulk of them in the Pereira area, but then you had a group of them in Medellin, and then you had some near Cali, not in Cali, but near Cali. And so they kind of all got together. Well, in Pareda, for example, there were all kinds of aunts and uncles and cousins, and there was one uncle that was quite wealthy with him and his wife and their children. They were quite wealthy. They lived in a big house. It was funny the way wealth played out back in those times. They overpaid on furniture, but the house itself looked pretty much like every other house. It's if anybody in the family was really down and out, then the rest of the family would chip in. And so the more wealth, like the aunt and uncle, the more they would help. And that's kind of a theme here, where in the US, I mean, you fall in hard times, you're not necessarily just on your own, but you're mostly on your own. Even if your family is chipping in, you don't have 300 of them. Now, there are exceptions, of course, but I'm speaking in general terms. Families here tend to be intact. Of course, there's marriages, exceptions, but there is a tendency to have more intact families. And a father and a mother and children are going to be far more successful. Even if they're poor, they're going to be more successful just because there's the mom can stay home, which is typical here, take care of the kids, take care of the household, where the father can go out and really focus on working 1, 2, 3 jobs or whatever. Unemployment for females here is a serious problem. But for men, things like construction, for example, it's very, I won't say easy, but it's not. It's certainly very possible to go and get a construction job if you really need money, and so you'll see that, and an intact family lends itself to that. This is a big one in my opinion. The lack of restrictive regulations by the government. It's a lot of barrios that are currently on level 2, level 3 on the economic scale, stratus, began as 1. And what is 1? 1 is basically you throw some boards and some sheets of tin together, and you don't have water or a very, very basic shelter. And what you'll see, and you're seeing it now, particularly with the influx of Venezuelans over the last few years, you're seeing in areas where nobody's really building anything. It's why you're going to see a lot of these things on real steep hills, places that just aren't prime places for any kind of construction or roads or that kind of thing. Well, that's land that nobody's using, and they just kind of homestead it. And so here you can find some out on the fringes of Armenia, like every city, where they just find these secluded areas that nobody's building in, and they put up their little tin shacks. Well, what happens here, because of the stability in other ways, you'll see them make a little money, and they get their food, and now they're just in poverty. They're not absolute poverty. And they'll take money, or they'll find things, and they'll start building that little shack up. Next thing you know, they're putting up some brick walls. They're putting on a ceiling that doesn't leak. They're paying to get water, electricity in there. Next thing you know, this little area where this was happening built itself up enough to move up to stratus 2 out of stratus 1. And over time, they'll move up to, they keep improving, and it'll move up to stratus 3. Well, can you imagine that happening in most countries? In most countries, they come along and bulldoze these things down. Mike, I appreciate you sent me that picture. I've been really scrambling, so I didn't reply, but he sent me a picture of Seattle, where you've got all these homesteaders, and they've trashed out places, and street people. Well, street people can't, hold on. Sorry about that. I may have some interruption here, but I'm going to wrap this up pretty quick. I've got contractor here fixing the ceiling and all kinds of stuff like that. Hold on, let me see if I can turn this phone off. There we go. Sorry about that. Glad to see you're still making videos. Your life does not have a donate button, brother. Well, I will provide one because with what I'm having to do right now, it's costing me a bit of money. So if anybody wants to contribute, I'll be certainly grateful. I won't complain about it. Hold on just a second. I was more in mind of trying to get this thing going today. All right, there we go. I pinned the link. All right, back to it. Sorry for those delays. Yeah, I've been making videos all along, actually, but here we go. Mike, how long have you been in Colombia? I'll let you guys chat. So the lack of regulation, they don't come and roust these people. They're poor, you know, you got enough problems, we're going to leave you to it. That allows them to build themselves up. And it's the same with jobs. If you can't find a job, you can't get yourself employed, you can start by selling gum on the street. You sell enough gum, you can buy yourself. There's actually a progression of this. After you sell some gum, maybe you get yourself one of those boxes, or you make one with a strap around your neck, and in the box you start stocking it up with different things. And so you've got that. And then after that, you might get yourself a cart and subscribe to the phone companies where you can sell minutes for the phone, and you're selling snacks. And so you've got that going. And after that, you can actually get yourself a little storefront. Tons of people have done that. A lot of the stores around here began that way. In most places, they come along and say, oh, you don't have a permit here, you know, and bust you up. You are required to have a permit to do certain things here when you get to the level of the cart, for example. However, even that can be overlooked unless you camp out on a corner where somebody's doing the same thing who actually got a permit. Well, they're probably going to complain to the police. So you got to get creative and find a place where you're not stepping on somebody else's toes, but you can still do some business. But the way things are here, kind of laissez-faire, it's don't bother them if they're trying to build themselves up out of poverty. Let them live. And that has huge impact on keeping people out of absolute poverty. Now, getting out of poverty, it might be decades-long task to get up to the tienda. But once you get there, then, you know, your family can carry it on and build it from there. So that's alive and well here in many ways. That really help people. And sadly, people here in Colombia don't even recognize, because they have no context of any other country, they don't recognize what a benefit that is. You know, okay, I'm destitute, I lost my job, some bad things happen, what do? Well, you can go out tomorrow and start shining a shoe or washing a windshield or something, and not get bothered, not get shut down. So that's pretty awesome. Okay, number 4 in the mitigating factors. You have free medical. That takes one of the big 3 away from the absolute poverty. Now, you don't have free medical for everybody, but the poor have subsidized medicine. Now, it's not subsidized. Well, there is a little government subsidy, but it's primarily subsidized by the health system itself. The health system itself is a private system that's overseen by the government, but there's no middlemen, and it's a very efficient one. It runs in profit. It runs in the black, so it's in no danger of going out of business or going bankrupt. And as part of that system, some funds are set aside to provide for, in the hospital or the clinics, free care. Now, it's not the best of care in that you might have to stand in line. It might be a while before you get an appointment, but it's there, it exists. And if you got an emergency, they'll treat it as an emergency. So, that's a big thing. John, thank you. Thank you. I wonder if that was you. That was probably you asking. I appreciate that. Then you have the utilities issue. If you're Stratus 1, you're not really paying for utilities, because as you go up, the utility bill gets a little higher and a little higher. And the difference of that, Stratus 1 and 2 do not pay into the Stratus system. Stratus 4, 5, and 6 subsidize 1, 2, and 3. That's kind of the way that works. So there's no government administering this program. It's done automatically. So when I pay my bill, a portion of that bill gets thrown into a pool that pays people that are in the lower stratus. Pretty awesome idea. There's no payroll tax on most people in Colombia. If you're wealthy, there'll be a payroll tax, but for most of the middle class, and certainly if you're in the lower class of poverty, you can be working a job, but there's no payroll. You're not paying out of pocket to the government. It's you do pay EVA, but the way everything is structured, it's really not that bad. The EVA is like a value-added tax, but it's built into all prices, so you don't really see it. And the prices with the EVA are as good or better than most places in this world. So it's hard to. They put together a pretty sweet situation. No, it was someone else. Okay, it's got your name on it. Oh, the person asked. Nope, was not me. Still setting up PayPal. Okay, all right. Let's see. What else we got? Number 5. Government doesn't own you if there's help. There are some situations where if you're absolutely starving, there's a way to get food, not money, but food directly from the government, bags of groceries. It's the absolute poverty end. And I didn't realize it existed until COVID came along. And that's when you started seeing people. There was a lot of private donations, people putting together groceries, taking contributions, bagging them up, delivering them. But there were also government people putting this together through a system that they have in place that I didn't realize pre-COVID, but it was there because as soon as COVID came, it kicked in. That's when I found out. No, that always existed. So there is a bit of a safety net, although it's very, very, very limited in funds. And they tend to use it more for, let's say, that mudslide that happened recently, and it put some people out of their house, and they were already in poverty. The government would come in kind of like a Red Cross would, provide, some basic goods for them so that they could survive to get themselves situated. So there is that. But the thing is, when the government, most of it is set up so the government's not even involved. Like I've already explained, the stratus or leave people alone, lack of permitting requirements, things like that. But even if you're involved with the government, they're not owning you. They're not signing you up to trap you so that you have to obey and comply with a whole list of things like, okay, we're going to give you this welfare, but not if your husband's in the home, therefore he has to move out, which keeps you in poverty. They don't have things like that. It's pretty much no strings. So that's a huge help that the government is really a stand back. And the people that I'm not against social programs. I'm against socialism, but social programs, I'm not hating on them. However, anything put together by the governments in this world tend to be bureaucratic and fail and overpriced and ripe for corruption. They tend to be real problematic. And here, where the government isn't involved, it keeps. I personally think it's a much better situation. But people could argue either way on that. Number 6, there's a tradition here of small basic housing. It's what the culture is. Now, how does that help? Well, first of all, you don't have peer pressure. I know several people that intentionally live in stratus 2 and 3 just because everything is so much cheaper, but they're sitting there firmly ensconced in the middle class with a nice car. So in the US, you'd have a lot of pressure to live in a nicer home, more commensurate with, the wage that you're earning. And for some people, you even have, I want to show off the wage I'm earning, or they even go into debt to show something that doesn't even exist. I mean, we know what that, the old keeping up with the Joneses theory. Well, that's not a thing here. Again, I'm generalizing, and there are some people that put on airs like that, but for the most part, it isn't like that. It's not, if you're living in stratus 3, but you're knocking down a real good income, here, people tend to think, well, that's pretty smart. He's saving money. Not like, oh, what are you, crazy? What's wrong with you? So there's that kind of thing. So I think it's really helpful to not have your friends and neighbors criticizing you or embarrassing you into living a more expensive life. And because you don't have that embarrassment, if you are poor, if you're living in poverty and you're having to live in, stratus 2, that's not going to eat you up all day long. It's not going to mess with your brain. It's not going to make you feel like crap. It's not going to, affect your self-esteem. You may want to move out because people here are very industrious. And as I've already expressed, how they try to build up and build out to something better for the most part. But it's pretty good along the way if you don't have to carry baggage of everybody being overly judgmental about the fact that you live in stratus 2. So, hold on. Holy moly. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Don't run. Wow. Wow, I really appreciate that. The screen jumped up when you posted, and that's when I saw what you did. That's one hell of a contribution. I really appreciate it. Okay, so this tradition of how 20 years ago you didn't really see big mansion play. I mean, where I'm living, there were very few and far between. Here, it's like a basic middle class. It's not richy, but it's a basic middle class place. 20 years ago, this would have been rare, and it would have been more upper middle class or rich. So times have changed, but because it's within a generation period of time, people, it's like so much of the population just grew up in these really small places. When I lived here before, I was living in this place. It was a 2-story. The second story had a tin roof with no insulation. Sun would beat on it on a day that wasn't overcast, and it would just radiate this heat. It was hotter in the house by far than if I just went outside. The second floor was just hellacious. But you sleep, their bedroom, you sleep at night, things cool off. So yeah, I guess it wasn't that big a deal. Downstairs, the living room and dining room were combined, and they were really tiny. The kitchen was, without exaggeration, was the size of a closet. I mean, you would have thought that they just put a stove and a refrigerator, a tiny refrigerator, in a closet. There was this doorway, and it was just like no room at all. And the stove was also a really small stove. There was no hot water, which was typical. There was no shower head. There was a pipe coming out of the wall. And every place that I saw that I would visit had the same thing, because you go in, you use the bathroom, and I'm checking it out. I was like, well, do they have hot? I never found anybody that had hot water. And I never found anybody with it. No, that's not true. The Jenny's uncle in Pareda had a pretty nice shower head. But outside, I don't remember, beyond that one, I don't remember ever seeing shower heads. So that's how people grew up. Well, if that's how you grew up, it's not that big of a deal. And so there is a culture of waste to a certain extent here, like throughout the world. But for the most part, not so much. For the most part, it's like we don't waste food. We don't throw away clothes on a whim. We take care of the things. There's Chinese goods you can buy here, but I've noticed that the majority of people that I know, this is anecdotal, but they'll save up to buy something of quality versus something just cheap out of China. A good place you can see that throughout the city is just look at the motorcycles. You'll see some Chinese motorcycles, but for the most part, you're going to see Suzuki or Honda or Yamaha. They're 4 times as much money, but they don't want something that's going to die in a year or two. So there's that idea that went back 20 years ago. It's like, well, if I'm going to go buy a sofa, I'm going to not buy a piece of crap. I'm going to wait until I can afford a good one. Now, some of that has changed to this day. I find a lot of furniture out there that is, for sale. It's kind of crappy and people are buying it. Where years ago you didn't see it like that so much, but it's still the majority of people are the way I'm explaining it. So that lack of peer pressure and this tradition of having small housing, I think it makes a difference. And last thing I have here, and then if we have any comments or questions, we can look at those. You can start now, as a matter of fact. The last thing is the public transport, which is certainly helpful. So you got buses that, yeah, it's pretty cheap. Taxis are very cheap. Well, people in poverty tend not to do taxis unless it's an absolute emergency. And they tend not to do buses. So what do? Well, walking, of course. But you have this thing here, and again, we go to where the government just doesn't bother people. You have an informal motorcycle taxi system. Every barrio's got a few guys that have a motorcycle, and you pay him pennies, and he'll run you to work or wherever. And it's more informal. It's like, okay, I'm getting out of work at 4 o'clock. Can you be here to pick me up? Yeah, I'll be here. Wait for me. And it's pretty cool. And now, you won't find it in the north. Well, maybe they're in the north, but it's very common in the south, where people tend to be more poor. It's where the poor lives, in the south, and you'll find these barrios where it's pretty standard, pretty traditional. There's a lot of differences. It's almost like 2 cities: the south of Armenia and the north of Armenia. the traditional food, for example, in the South, I think is far superior in quality than in the North. They just do traditional food better. I don't know exactly why it is. It's the portions are more generous. It's more flavorful. It's cooked. It's more apt to be cooked with charcoal. Where in the North, it's almost like traditional food is almost like sanitized. So I mean, that's not. You can get other foods here, but if you really want good Southern food, if you really want good traditional food, with a few exceptions, the South, most places you go into are going to be pretty good, where in the North it's going to be hit and miss. So there's big differences between the North and the South, and there's if you don't have, if you're not middle class and above, you're probably not going to live in the North. It's more expensive to live in the north of Armenia than in the South. And so it's almost different culturally. It's the malls are in the north. So if people want to go to a mall, they kind of have to go central and north. Of course, the bargains are in the tiendas or in the south or in El Centro. So overall, you have the situation, kind of cultural government structure, that really are a big factor in why Colombia's absolute poverty is in such a respectable place. So, I got somebody buzzing me. I'm going to put you on hold. I'm sorry. I'll be probably 2 minutes.
Here's your story, let's begin. The water's fine, come on, dive in. The future's here, it's right before your eyes. Step by step, you're on your way. You're welcome to a brighter day. Don't you know it feels good to be alive? You could be larger than life, bigger than the world, living out the hopes and dreams of every boy and every girl. You could fly higher than the sky, shine brighter than the stars. You could have all you ever wanted, shoot the moon and reach for Mars. You know you could. Yeah, and times are changing everywhere. Do we dream and do we dare? It's up to you, the door is open wide. Feel the rhythm of today, learn the part and join the play. The world is here.
Okay, if you, no, I don't know if you could hear it. The doorbell was ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. And I mentioned earlier that I'd probably have an interruption. So it's done, taken care of. So that's basically what we got cut off on Sunday. And again, the whole purpose was to really try to put things in perspective, because the perception is that most people in Colombia are living in abject poverty. And it's simply not the case. Even the people in poverty, the majority of them, they're not missing a meal. You know, they got a roof over their head. And so it's not as bad as the perception is. Whew. Ran up and down them stairs. I'm winded. What happens when you get old and fat? Okay, do we have any questions? Anything, anyone? Got anybody still here? Yeah, I got a few people here. It's not like Sunday, but these are unplanned, and you know, people are probably. Oh, Rob, that package is on its way to you. I don't know I'm not sure yet how we'll get this together, how it'll work out, but I wanted to get it in your hands because worst case is I can always have you send it. Where it was kind of it's complicated, but you know, he's a over the road truck driver who's mostly gone weeks at a time, and he retires in December at 65. And I've been asking him, it's like, why aren't you retired? Why don't you just retire at 62? You know, it's like he's got money. Oh my God, phone's ringing. But he wanted to continue work because truckers right now are being paid double and triple time on regular runs. He says that it's crazy how much money that he's banking. So, because it's kind of difficult right now, I figured I'll send it, get it in your hands, and we'll see how that goes. Do we have any questions on topic or off topic before I wrap up for the day? Ordering sending packages from Colombia. No, it's not coming from Colombia. It's coming from the U.S. to the U.S. Anyone? Anything? I know that you're all busy. I appreciate the people that did come in. And now at least I have in the library some of the main points of that topic. And so I wanted to get that done. And I'm looking and everything's still working. So maybe, of course, it hasn't been that long, but maybe everything will help keep us in control of YouTube throttling me. I don't know. We'll see. All right. Well, really enjoyed the show. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad you were here. Those of you that did show up, diehards, I really appreciate it. Unscheduled, kind of at a whim. I was trying since yesterday, and I've rescheduled it several times. This morning, I was trying it at 9:30, and the workman showed up, and he left while I was doing this. Okay, that's it. So thanks a lot. I will see you Sunday. I may be driving to Bucaramanga over the weekend. If so, I'll put a few messages, postings up to say that. I'm not sure yet. Depends on how things go. All right, that's it. Thank you. See you Sunday.